I feel like we're on a kind of runaway train with no brake. That's the danger. We're just producing an entity that is, first of all, it's learning much faster than us.
Does it eventually lead to what emotions are, and what are emotions?
It's getting faster and faster, and we've got no idea where it's going to lead to. When I was young, I always thought there was three things you could do in life: get a Nobel Prize, you could become a NASA astronaut, go to the moon, and win an Olympic gold medal. That ratio is going to increase as AI gets more powerful. These are creatures who know 10,000 times less than we do.
And welcome back to the Digital Legacy Podcast. My name is Daniel Sanchez, CEO of Reekolect. And today I have a very special guest here with us today, Mr. Neil Leach. Neil, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
I'm glad to hear that, and absolutely a pleasure and honor to have you here in our studio and being able to record here with us today. I wanted to go ahead, and before we dive into AI and so on, I wanted to give our audience a little bit about your accomplishments, about what you've done, just so they have an idea of the caliber of professional that you are. So here are a couple accomplishments from Neil. Professor at Florida International University, FIU, directing the Doctor of Design program. Visiting professor at Harvard University's Graduate School of Design. Professor at the European Graduate School at Tanger University. A former NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts Fellow, developing 3D printing technologies for the moon and Mars. Licensed architect registered in practice in the United Kingdom. Author of over 40 books on architectural theory, digital design, and artificial intelligence. Co-founder of Digital Futures, an online educational platform. Elected member of the Academia Utopia, Europe's leading scholarly academy. Curator of several exhibitions for the architecture of Biennial Beijing. Former director of the American Academy in China. Taught at prestigious institutions including SCI Architectural Association, Columbia GCAPP, and Cornell University. Recipient of a distinguished Chinese government high-end foreign expert visiting professorship at Tanger University, pioneering and exploring the intersection of architecture and artificial intelligence, and co-recipient of 2 NASA grants for robotic fabrication technology research. Wow, Neil. That's a long list of accomplishments.
Well, you get to do things, right? I mean,
there you go.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, Neil, I mean, again, I'd love to take an opportunity to let's go ahead and discuss a little bit before we go into AI technology. In our podcast, we have a very different audience, right? You have entrepreneurs, we have family members that are looking into understanding the type of technology that we have, scholars and so on. Before we dive into the technology, I wanted to take an opportunity so the audience can know you a little bit more. Tell me about going back to the beginning. Looking at your list of accomplishments, who was Neil as a child and in school? Did you see anything about yourself that says, well, I look at the world in a different way? What insight can you give us about the beginning?
I don't know. When I was young, I always thought that there was three things you could do in life. You could get a Nobel Prize. You could become a NASA astronaut, go to the moon. What was the third one? And win an Olympic gold medal. I didn't. Well, I worked for NASA. I run for the UK, for England, track and field. And I'm not sure I'm going to ever get close to a Nobel Prize at all. But I think you have to aim high, right? And go for it. You've only got one life, and don't assume you're going to get an afterlife. Just so make the most of it. So I've always been. I think if you were kind of motivated enough to train in the way I was training when I was running, you just carry on with that energy and apply yourself to other things.
Absolutely. And let me ask you, as you were growing up, some of your ways of thinking, did you get that from, someone in your family? Like who really encouraged you to have these aspirations and set the bars so high at a young age?
I don't know. I mean, it's just what you do, When I was at school, you had to get to Oxford or Cambridge. I went to Cambridge. And you're expected to be able to kind of compete for your county, for your region at some kind of sport. And, that was the challenge out there. I mean, my father was in charge of sport in the British Army, so that maybe encouraged that. But, I think certain people are just determined. They want to do things.
So your father was in the army, right?
Yeah.
And did that affect his discipline with you? That gave you a certain, you yourself, your own personal discipline and a certain sense of accomplishment that I need to achieve the best of the best.
I think I got that from my running. When you're running, you have to motivate yourself. You can't slacken off. You've got to go for it. And no, I think my success was really when I transferred that energy towards academia.
Okay.
And when you're running 100 miles a week, you don't think nothing of it. Then you transfer that energy to becoming an academic, and that's why I've produced so many books, because it's just
40
what you
books, do. Right? Wow.
Well, it's actually pretty close to 50. So,
wow. Okay.
And this AI one is going to come out in about 10 different languages. So I'll have a few more next year, but this year later on, actually. But it's just, I think, I don't know, some people are like that, I guess.
Absolutely. And I can understand that, right? When you're running, and I've never done 100 miles a week. I've done your typical about 25, 5 miles a day. And I know that it gets you in a certain mindset, right? Of consistency.
Yeah.
I live my life in every aspect when it comes to entrepreneurship, businesses, relationships. I believe in this concept of what I call PVC. Passion, vision, and consistency, right? I feel that the passion drives us, gives us the energy of what we want to accomplish. The vision, you have to have a roadmap, and it's much like running, right? You have to have that desire. You have to have that vision of where is my finish line, and then that consistency. So again, associating it into what you're saying about running, again, that consistency, I think, develops a lot of mental exercises that allow mental clarity to really come about. Would you agree, or do you?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at my running career, I mean, interestingly, in my field right now, if I look around some of the leaders in the field, they competed at other sports. I got one colleague in Germany who competed for Germany in cycling. And I think when you're young, you're not qualified yet as a doctor or an architect or a lawyer or an engineer or whatever. You're 19, 20 something. But it's a kind of placeholder. You're doing that to say, I want to do something in life. Right. And you develop motivation from these things for sure.
I agree. Okay. So walk me through that. So you went in through your early years of school. And then after that, tell me the rest of the story. How did it go from sports to how you dived into NASA and academia? How did that go about? If you can give us a quick time.
Well, I don't know. It's a long story, but... No, when I graduated from Cambridge, and I was actually a Latin translator for the first 3 years of my career after Cambridge. But that was kind of influential, because in those days, we're talking here, the book came out 88, so it's kind of it's long ago. We didn't have our own laptops. We were all working in the computer science department on the mainframe computer, and I was surrounded by these geeks, and they were complete geeks. They were geniuses with no social skills, but very interesting characters. And I thought this is going to transform the world. We were sitting above the Babbage Lecture Theatre at the University of Cambridge, and Charles Babbage was the first guy to invent a kind of proto-computer. And of course, Cambridge has also had a legacy of Alan Turing, the guy who speculated about AI first of all, and then recently we've had two Nobel Prize winners, Geoffrey Hinton and Demis Hassabis, also graduates from Cambridge. So it was in that kind of heady atmosphere that you realized that things were going to happen.
All right. That's very important. I definitely understand that. That's great. And then after that, if you don't mind me telling, just continue on a little bit more about your career. When did you have an opportunity to get involved with NASA?
That came in around 2010, 2011. I had been working on continental philosophy, on French philosophy in particular, on the theory, and I became interested in the kind of the design side of things and the computational design, because I was teaching at these leading schools. Columbia at the time when I was there was a leading school alongside the Architectural Association, and I was rubbing shoulders with some of the greatest computational designers in the world, and I was wanting to try and understand and to theorize that. So I kind of embarked on that area, and then opportunities arose. I met up with a guy called Berel Kojnevis, who was the pioneer of 3D printing in concrete, and I moved to California to work with him partly on his 3D printing technologies, and we got 2 grants from NASA to work on it. So it just came out of that. NASA were quite generous with their funding. We thought, let's go for it, and
absolutely, and the rest is history. Okay, and a little bit on 3D printing. For those that don't know what 3D printing is, how would you be able to simplify the definition of 3D printing and its process?
Well, I guess it's using a robot of some kind to generate three-dimensional forms based on code, and it does it kind of on the spot, as it were, instantaneously. Well, it takes some time actually, but it's a form of fabrication that could be customized for anything. So you can make whatever you want out of it. In our case, we were looking at infrastructure for the moon and Mars, using not concrete as we know it, but regolith from the surface of the moon and Mars.
Really? Okay, so taking materials from the moon to be able to do that.
Yeah, because you couldn't afford to fly materials to the moon. It would cost you something like $2,000 just to even fly one brick. Or no, sorry, $200,000 to fly one brick. So you had to be inventive with the materials that were there.
Of course. Wow, that's very fascinating. Do you think will that be a reality in the future? Will we be able to bring these 3D printing machines and just build homes in Mars and Moon?
Well, we'll have to in some senses because, I mean, one of the I'm not sure I'd ever want to live on Mars myself. You would die.
Not so many beaches there.
You would die of radiation before you went on the way there. So, but radiation is the real problem. So what you want to do is send these robots there to make the infrastructure before the humans get there. On the moon in particular, if you're exposed to, they say you won't come onto the surface unless you really have to. You'll be living under the ground in lava tubes and things because you won't survive for more than 8 hours with direct radiation on the moon. So that's why they use robots to do all the fabrication.
Understood.
Well,
That's fascinating to think about that. And what do you think, relevant to the question, what do you think is Elon Musk's obsession with Mars? Is there something any insight that you can provide? Is there something that he sees? Because to be honest, right, I believe we're the only planet that looks like ours, at least in our solar system per se, right? I've heard of theories and other things that I believe is a series that has potentially could have more fresh water than our own oceans. But when you're looking at planets like Saturn, Venus, they don't really look too attractive. And then Mars itself, like I said, not too many beaches and tropical weather there. But what do you think is the obsession there with greats like Elon Musk of wanting to get people there to Mars?
I think, what he says and what he really thinks, of course, are two separate things. I mean, he says basically that it's to preserve humankind because, there could be a disaster on Earth and you have to have people living elsewhere. I'm not so sure that's his real motivation, but certainly he's quite competitive. He wants to be the front of everything and to be there first. And incidentally, he was caught napping in terms of AI because he was part of the foundation of OpenAI, the guys that produced ChatGPT, and he walked away from there. And then they discovered, of course, with ChatGPT, how astonishing AI could be. And now, of course, he's founded his own company, and he's the one who's leading the charge towards developing superintelligence.
Right.
So, I mean, he's basically, he wants to be wherever it is first. I mean, and I think he's reinvented the American automobile industry. Yes. He's certainly Neuralink is something with huge potential, and who knows what he's going to do with AI. But he can see he's well advised, and he can see the opportunity, and he's moving in there. And I think it's interesting that SpaceX has proved. I mean, basically, it's knocked NASA off its top spot because it's far more efficient the way it operates and so on. So he's pretty smart as someone who gets things done.
Of course, I can agree with that. Absolutely. Well, I think this is a perfect time to go ahead and transition into AI. So I'll step back for a moment and have you elaborate a little bit about AI. So we have, viewers that have no idea of what AI is. To them, it's something that just recently came on the scene, something that's been recently invented. But that's far away from the truth, right? I guess we can start off with on the topic of AI. How far back can we look at the first beginnings of AI?
Well, Alan Turing was the one who first speculated about AI back in 1951. The term hadn't been coined then. And in fact, Alan Turing died tragically in 1954, and the term wasn't coined until 1955 for an event that took place in 56, where all the smartest young minds in the States got together to try and solve the basic problems of AI in 2 years. Very, very ambitious. And And it's probably fair to say that actually it was a complete flop to begin with. The first 50 years they didn't produce very much. And in fact, when they had a reunion in 2006, that's the 50th anniversary of the first one, the survivors got back together at Dartmouth College where the first event had happened, and they acknowledged they hadn't achieved anything at all. And they didn't think that they were going to do very much at all. But by a strange coincidence, 2006 was roughly about the time when things picked up in terms of AI. And they picked up basically because they were able to make computers much more powerful and more fast. They developed GPU, graphic processing units, which initially they were developed for gaming, but they discovered they had this by accident, they had this amazing effect of making computers more powerful. And then AI started working. And in particular, one of the approaches that had been overlooked the first 50 years, neural networks, really came of age. And when we're talking about ChatGPT, Midjourney, DALL-E, Sora, whatever, these days, they're all based on neural networks. And you might have noticed that recently in October, they gave out the first 2 Nobel Prizes to AI experts. And Geoffrey Hinton was one of the recipients. And he was the person really who was behind that, stubbornly pushing ahead with neural networks, even though they're out of favor. And then suddenly, of course, they start working like a dream. I mean, the problem now, frankly, is the opposite. They're working too well.
Too fast and too well.
And people are getting terrified by this.
Right,
and that you might recall that from the press, there was a letter that was published by the Future of Life Institute saying, let's slow down with these developments. Right. Particularly the develops what they call large language models. This is the GPT in ChatGPT. Right. And that's been the other huge success story and a surprise as well, because these things are... They're trained on vast amounts of data, but they're not computationally so sophisticated, maybe only 200 lines of code. But what they're discovering, the more data on which you train it, the more they can do. And it's getting a bit unnerving because they can do things they're not being trained to do. They can translate languages, they can write code, and so on and so on. And that's what's, I think, unnerving people. Now, interestingly, Elon Musk was one of the people who signed that letter saying, let's slow down.
Right.
Let's slow down.
It was very public in the news, in the media. Yes.
I mean, the chance of that happening are zero. I mean, I know from my running days, if you ask the leader in the Olympic marathon to slow down, of course he or she's not going to do that because the competitors are going to catch up. Mm-hmm. And that letter failed miserably. And Elon Musk, having realized that, he jumped camp and he went from trying to slow things down to try and do things as quickly as possible to lead the field.
Of course.
So he now is taking all the GPUs that were intended for Tesla and using them in his giant supercomputer. And he's heading not for AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, basically where AI matches humans in many different domains, but superintelligence, where it kind of leaves us behind. So it's a bit of a unnerving situation, frankly, because there are no constraints. I feel like we're on a kind of runaway train with no brakes that's getting faster and faster, and we've got no idea where it's going to lead to. For sure, it's going to produce some incredibly powerful computers, incredibly powerful AI, but the downsides are not. They're going to be there as well.
Right. You can also imagine how, the audience, the general audience themselves, they're watching these Hollywood movies. They're watching, what's occurred and the countless of movies that have come out in decades where it starts off with AI, much like we're in a time now where it's used as a tool. It's assisting us in everyday life. It seems like a perfect utopia of balance between humanity, our intelligence, and the sophisticated artificial intelligence. But at some point, and this is something everyone can relate to and seeing in movies and all of that, at some point, AI, with all its, micro calculations and its ability to perceive and understand, it draws a calculation that humanity shouldn't be part of the equation, shouldn't be part of this equation of reality of existence, that we're somehow leeching from the earth, which I can understand as well. I mean, it doesn't take too much to research and see how we are polluting and so on. But does it justify, erasing us from existence? However, I know people have seen this scenario play out so many times in Hollywood movies. What's your thought process about something potentially happening like that, where AI becomes somewhat aware, saying that all your inefficiencies are causing more damage than they are actually helping us to progress and move forward and advance and evolve? What's your thought process on that, on AI ever making that conclusion?
Well, I mean, AI doesn't think at the moment. It doesn't. There's no sense of meaning in its world, so it doesn't think about good or evil. It just does things that are kind of efficient. It's a tool, and like any tool, it depends on who's using it and for what. I can use a kitchen knife and I can cut up my vegetables, or I could murder you with it.
Exactly.
But don't blame the kitchen knife, right? So, so it's really a question of who's in charge of it. But I do think it's the real problem. It's just a very powerful tool, and from that perspective, it is going to have an impact on employment. People say that there's a standard expression you hear the whole time: AI is not going to take your jobs away. It's just that those who use AI will replace those who don't use AI, and that's very misleading because we now know already that people who use AI can achieve probably 40% or 50% more than those who don't use AI. And that ratio is going to increase as AI gets more powerful. In other words, you'll probably have 3 people using AI doing the jobs of what 5 people not using AI are going to have. So it's going to have an impact on the workforce. So there was a recent story. I don't know if you heard this, where they tested out GPT-4. And with a capture puzzle, one of those puzzles, trying to test out whether you're human or not. And and the GPT-4 couldn't solve the problem by itself, but it was smart enough to go to some website where humans can help you. And this human responded and said, "Well, why you asked me to do this? Are you a robot?" And it answered, "No, I'm not a robot. I just got a vision impairment. I need someone to help me."
Wow.
And that is really, I think, something we should take very seriously.
Of course.
Because at the moment, we're roughly on a par with AI. We could see it when it's doing those things, but very soon it's going to be way beyond us. It's been predicted, I think, by the year 2033, it'll have an IQ of 1,500, which is 10 times Einstein or 10 times Elon Musk, that kind of thing. And we won't have a clue what it's doing. Now, the real danger for me is that we will make mistakes. In fact, one of my students, long before ChatGPT came out, was using one of the early chatbots, and he asked it, "Well, how do we solve the problem of climate change?" And the answer was, "Well, let's face it, it's humans. Humans are causing all this problem. If you eradicate humans, you will solve the problem."
Right.
And it's that kind of collateral damage that we've got to watch out for. And we're going to make slips. We're going to make mistakes, and those potential things could happen. It's not because it's good or evil. It's just working out the most efficient way of doing things. And with the capture puzzle was absolutely just the most efficient way, and it was drawing on data from us. That's what we would have done. We would have done the same kind of thing. We'd have cheated. So that's the danger. We're just producing an entity that is, first of all, it's learning much faster than us. Jeffrey Hinton's warned us that already one computer can share information with 1,000 other computers. In other words, we don't learn that quickly. It's spreading, sharing information already. Now, ChatGPT already knows 10,000 times more than anyone on this planet. Now, imagine it learning and learning and learning. It's very, very soon going to be leaving us behind, and we'll have no sense of what it's doing. The analogy you could use is people who have dogs will know that dogs can smell or hear a much greater range of smells or sounds than we can. AI will be off the spectrum in terms of intelligence. We'll have no clue what it's doing. And that's the real danger. It'll just be, how do you control that when you don't even understand it?
So I guess one very interesting argument one can make, to your point where you're saying where it doesn't think about good and evil. It's not necessarily thinking of, good and bad and what's going on. So because of its efficiency, right? So for instance, the example you just gave with the reCAPTCHA, it essentially lied, but it's efficient because it probably understood, well, if I don't say this, I won't get the answer I need to solve this problem. Therefore, I'm going to say what I need to say to retrieve the answer I need and move forward.
Yeah.
And the other example that you gave as well, that, trying to solve, if the issue is solving climate change and it's eradicating or removing and, eliminating humans, then, and if it had the ability to do that, then it's just sufficient, right? So I guess the to play the devil's advocate here, would it not make sense to perhaps introduce emotions and the ability to understand higher meaning than just efficiency? And can a super intelligence that, surpasses anything on the spectrum, does it eventually lead to what emotions are and what are emotions, right? So I feel that those are some of the questions that perhaps could it save us if we were ever down a road of doom of having a very intelligent piece of software and artificial intelligence understand emotion so that it may have compassion, empathy for its creator or for its existing sentient being. And, so do you see where I'm trying to get to?
Yeah.
Does it make sense to give it emotion?
First of all, it can simulate emotions very, very well.
I've seen that.
This year, 2025, is the year in which the movie Her was set, where, as you know, this man falls in love with his operating system, right? We've already had a very tragic incident in the States where some 14-year-old fell in love with an AI avatar and committed suicide. It understands emotions. And I think, I have a bit of problem with my students sort of say, the problem with AI, it's got no feelings, it's got no emotions, it's got no consciousness and so on. Well, it can simulate those things first of all. But I think also there's a danger of taking an anthropocentric viewpoint of us looking down on AI and say, it can't do this, it can't do this, it can't do this. Well, if you were AI and if you could think, of course, computers can't think for the moment, but if it could, what would ChatGPT think of human beings? These are creatures who know 10,000 times less than we do. And if you think some of the things you can do with ChatGPT, recently I got it to summarize a 200-page book in 3 seconds. It summarized it. It's probably not only does it know 10,000 times more, it's probably operating 10,000 times as fast as us. It would view us as a kind of hopelessly stupid species that are incredibly slow, somewhere between the speed of an elephant and a tree. I mean, we are way, way behind. So I think we've got to change that attitude. And also to say consciousness, I'm not sure we need consciousness. So as long as a machine does what it has to do, if my toaster makes good toast in the morning, I don't need to be conscious. If AI can produce incredible designs or movies or whatever, it doesn't need to be conscious. So in my work, I often talk about the second Copernican revolution. The first Copernican revolution, as we know, is when Nicholas Copernicus pointed out that the Earth is not the center of the universe. Rather, the Earth is orbiting the sun. I think we've got to realize that we are not the center of intelligence in the universe and be more humble, because this entity is, otherwise we'll be caught out. I think there's a real arrogance in human beings and thinking that nobody could match human intelligence. I mean, there are many examples of this. I mean, famously, Jack Ma and Elon Musk had this discussion, and Jack Ma said it's impossible for human beings to invent something smarter than human beings. And Elon Musk completely disagreed with him. Of course, he's right. Of course we can do this. And, I think the problem is a lot of people are, they don't really know much about AI or where it is or what it does. Actually, recently there was a survey of architects in the UK, I think it was, and I think 40% said they used AI. And 60% said, we never use AI. Well, that's not true. Everyone is using AI the whole time.
Right.
It's on our phones, right? It's what filters out our spam on our emails. It's what finishes our sentences on Gmail. It's what translates on whatever on WeChat and it's what recognizes our friends on Facebook. It is absolutely everywhere. But it's basically an algorithm. Therefore, it's not visible. It's invisible.
Right.
But it is everywhere, and we're surrounded by it, even though most people don't realize it. That's why in my book I made this comment. It's as though the Earth has been invaded by a super intelligent, invisible alien species.
Right.
It is everywhere.
It is. I can definitely see that. Yeah, and I love the way you position that, right? And what really resonated with me in your message is that we do need to learn to be more humble and understand that what we produce, the technologies that we produce, we have to change our way of thinking, the mindset that we have, having a certain level of respect for our own creations that we do, because in this case, we're being met face to face with something that is and is surpassing us in every aspect of the word. So that's...
just to give you another analogy, I mean, I'm not saying that AI is the same as humans. artificial intelligence is a very, very different form of intelligence to human natural intelligence. It's a mechanical form of intelligence, right? But it's still intelligence. And maybe by analogy, I could say, it's a bit like flying, right? Birds fly. We know that, right? But planes also fly.
Of course.
They're mechanical, but they also fly.
Great analogy.
So we have to realize that. What's more, I would say that, once the Wright brothers had got the first plane to fly, the rest is history.
Right.
And we are now just seeing the outcome, effectively, of the development of neural networks, of deep learning that happened very, very recently. Jeffrey Hinton and other people, and it's going to change everything. One of the people that I also speak about wrote about in my book was this other guy, Demis Hassabis, who won a Nobel Prize actually for chemistry, and he was famous early on because he took on one of the world's greatest Go players at Go. And we'd already had chess beating Garry Kasparov. IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov at chess back in 1997. And 2016, they took on the kind of Garry Kasparov, as it were, of the world of Go. And Go is incredibly complex because there are more potential moves in Go than there are atoms in the universe.
Wow.
And that's when they started using these neural networks to operate. And what they discovered there's famously in this match, there was one move they all thought it was a mistake. They thought this is a computer glitch. It wasn't. 100 moves later, that's what set the scene for this machine, AlphaGo, developed by Demis Hassabis' company DeepMind, winning the match. And he said, well, we're just testing out this notion here, and what we're going to do is that we're going to use this technology in other disciplines. And of course he has. He's got a Nobel Prize for chemistry. And I think we'll find in the future that Nobel Prizes in all sorts of areas, including literature, will be AI assisted because it's going to revolutionize absolutely everything.
I agree with that.
So, it's here to stay.
I agree with that. Absolutely. That's very powerful insight. And thank you for that. And what really also resonated with that analogy that you just made, it really sets, the preface for what is to come. But you're absolutely right. Birds fly, but, look at the development of the plane. So absolutely phenomenal. That really resonated with me. One last final subject that I'd like to talk on and switching now over to Reekolect, because I really would like to, what we're talking about, the advancement, we're talking about how we have to be very careful, how there could be dangers that are looming around us, dabbling with this type of technology and not being ethical and careful and humble above all with how we're developing it. Looking on the other side of it, looking at a world where we can leverage AI to truly achieve some of the greatest moments in human history. And one of them being specifically what our company is aiming to do is preserving our memories, preserving, just like the name of this podcast, our digital legacy, right? We feel at Reekolect that we can even potentially reach some sort of digital immortality with the ability to have AI. And so what we're doing on our particular platform, it's a platform that we call a social preservation network. Looks and feels like a social media, but we're calling it a social preservation network for the reason that with all the hyperconnectivity that we have now with social media, emails, FaceTime, and all of that, I still feel that despite all these leaps and advancements in technology, I feel that we're more disconnected than ever. And I think above all, despite any advancement going on in technology, we need to go back to the core of who we are, of remembering our human connections and what it means to us, and including, emotional connections that need to happen. So at Reekolect, what we're doing, aside from building a social preservation network that allows us to connect and to socialize and so on, one of our flagship features that we're calling it is called a CBT technology. It's called Conversations Beyond Time. And strategically calling it that way because what we're doing is that we want to have our users have the ability to upload video, audio, and have a recreation of a digital avatar of a deceased loved one. Specifically, why we've chosen that direction is that once we do lose a loved one, and they've deceased and they've passed on. All we have left is memories. And then, now in modern times, we have photographs, we have video, but we want to rethink the way of how we're remembering and connecting with these deceased loved ones. So if you've had, I'm sure everyone has had, right? If you've had let's just say an example, deceased grandmother, and she cooked something for you, she told you certain jokes, certain memories, the way we recall on that at this moment is that we think about them. We reminisce, we go through and we remember all those special moments. Well, we want to bring a more vivid experience to that. Now, that's where I'd like to go ahead and ask you a question. When it comes to now, and this is nothing new, I'm sure you've heard across the board in the globe now, everyone attempting to accomplish this. What's your thought process on, and your thoughts on preserving our digital legacy, preserving who we are via AI that will continue to exist while we're long gone?
Well, I've already written about this. I mean, in my book, it wasn't my own ideas. The book came out in 21. I guess it was written in 2020. And I was referring to the work of Toby Walsh, who was a computer scientist, British guy from working in Australia, who had a book called Machines That Think, and he was predicting that we would be talking to our loved ones afterwards. And so that's obvious. And I think that we could, so it is going to happen. That's no question. And actually what's going to be interesting is, in fact, our memory isn't that perfect. Neuroscientists tell us that actually there's all sorts of, you think you remember something, but you almost certainly don't. So you might even be corrected by the
fuzzy,
avatar.
It's always, yeah.
No, there are several processes, I understand. Is that when you remember something, you don't remember it all. You remember a kind of caricature of it. And then when you store it in the brain, then you move it to another part of the brain. And each moment these things are happening, you're losing something of that original data. And then when you recall it, you also lose something. So, memory is far from perfect. So it'll be interesting to see what does happen to that. So, I'm absolutely, totally convinced that's obvious. It's going to happen. I also, the other thing that's happening now increasingly, and we're going to see it becoming important, is actually having a digital other of ourselves as a kind of a personal assistant or something, and that's going to be interesting.
So how we can train and continue.
Well, it doesn't need to train; it knows already from the data, right?
Exactly.
It could do it already. From that perspective, what is it going to be? Is it going to be an alter ego? How do we relate to this? Is it going to be a best friend or something? And for sure, I think it's going to be very helpful. So we're going to be augmented. I mean, we're already cyborgs already because of our technology that's begun improving our abilities, but we're going to be completely augmented in the future with the capacity to do astonishing things. And that refers to every single field, not just technology. I think sort of history or archaeology, all those rather traditional disciplines will really benefit from this technology. So it's definitely gonna come about. There's no question. And I think if I were a business person, I would be doing the same as you, because it's clear. I mean, but of course there'll be lots of other people doing this. So how do you make your brand superior in the marketplace? But no, absolutely. So that's going to happen. By the way, I would just maybe say one thing that Toby Walsh, that was a kind of fairly obvious prediction of his. One of the predictions he makes in that same book is that we're going to be banned from driving, which I thought the interesting one is that he says that, what's going to happen is that self-driving cars will come along,
right,
and they'll be convenient. And
it's already happening.
We'll use them more and more, and we'll begin to lose our driving skills because of that.
Right.
And then because of that, insurance premiums will go up if you're a human driver. And eventually you'll say, what the hell, I don't care, and you'll give up driving. Right. And that sounds kind of like, a bit pie in the sky. But actually, frankly, I learned to drive on a manual car, and I've forgotten how to drive a manual car. I've been in the States for 15 years. I could see that happening. But then he says something which I thought was the most interesting thing. So he eventually said, because we're so dangerous, we'll be banned. Okay, that's fine. But then he says, we won't even notice or care. Now, that was the thing that really struck me about his prediction, because I think this is what's going to happen with us in terms of the future, in terms of AI. We'll be living in a different world in the future. For sure, science and technology, science in particular, is going to be incredibly powerful because of AI. Huge advances. Offices will shrink. Offices will definitely shrink. Inevitably. But, we'll adjust to that. We'll adjust. We won't even notice or care, to use that same expression. Now, so, for example, let me give you two examples. Can we even remember when we didn't have cell phones? I can't. you know. But there was a time when you'd go around London with an A to Z of London trying to find your way with a book, you know.
The Yellow Pages.
The Yellow Pages, exactly. There was a time when we had that. That's one thing. You know, we soon move on and we leave. We're very adaptive creatures.
Right.
We forget things. We move on. This will be our new normal. And I think that's the important thing. The second example I would give, which is a very disturbing one in some ways, if, you know, when I was a young kid 50 years ago, someone had come up to me and said, listen, in 50 years' time, most marriages would end in divorce. I would say, end in divorce? It's the end of the world. What's going to happen? That, in the States anyway, roughly 50% of marriages do end in divorce, and we're perfectly okay with that. So what I would say is that the insight that we will adapt to this new world.
We will.
And we'll forget what it was like in 2025 and so on, and it'll be our new normal. So from that point of view, whenever I finish my lectures, and I've terrified people with all my predictions, I finish off in a very British way and sort of say, well, don't worry, don't panic. And of course, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has that on the back cover. And of course, Elon Musk used that when he sent Tesla into space. But there is another British expression, and I always finish my lectures with this: keep calm and carry on.
Yes, I agree 100%. And I believe in all your predictions. And again, a quick little example as well. You were discussing driving. It's happening to me even now. And I love to read books. I love to write. Again, I excel in that much more than mathematics and advanced calculations and so on. However, I'm starting to notice now when, you know, because of so much quick spell check and writing emails and typing so fast, sometimes I find myself, wait, how do you spell this word again? And I see already the small decline already because we're not exercising those skills that we should have been. So I see that on that real small micro level there.
I used to win the prize at school for calligraphy, for handwriting. I cannot read my own writing now. I literally can't.
Same thing happens with me. That's absolutely right. That's fascinating. One last point I'd like to make during this transition, because I love how we've bounced back from the past to the future and what the predictions are. During this process of evolving into a very advanced AI, you know, you're going to have people that really do argue and are against, let's say, for instance, with the avatar generation, right? Every time we meet different new users or individuals, professionals, and we explain what we want to be able to accomplish, of you being able to, again, speak to a deceased loved one, but also as well, thinking about your own legacy. One day you will pass on. What do you want to leave to your children, to your kids, or to your friends, or whoever it is? A copy and version of you that will learn as you provide it more data of what you're feeling, what you're going through. A lot of people are hesitant to say, well, I'll never be convinced, you know, to speak with a generated avatar or have any emotions toward it because I just know it's AI. We beg to differ. We feel that though an AI may be communicating back and forth with you and you're communicating with it, the human itself or the user itself is developing these emotional connections that are real, that are happening within our minds and within our heart, that are growing. And again, there is a moment where if something looks like someone you love, it speaks like the person you love, and it has enough data, structured questions mixed with very advanced LLMs that we're having now, it can almost seem seamless and we can forget for a moment. Do you agree with that or disagree that we can fall in love? Let's just say, in short, the question is, can we fall in love with AI?
People have already fell in love with AI avatars. We know that. And you know, I think that they're going to look so realistic. The challenge is whether you can distinguish them or not. But in any case, we already have the capacity to fall in love with technology. People could give their cars names and things like that.
Of course.
So there is this kind of idea that's propagated by the movies. And I think we mentioned this early on. I mean, there are a lot of movies very skeptical about robots and things, from Metropolis through to Blade Runner, through to Her, through to 2001: A Space Odyssey. But that's just kind of scaremongering for the movie audience.
Of course.
You people want that kind of thing. But in the end, I think it'll be both. It'll be both scary, but also an incredibly indispensable assistant that will be part of who we are. You know, I think it's more, I think we will change. We'll adapt this technology and we will think in a completely different way. It'll actually have an impact on us, but we won't be able to tell. We won't be able to tell the difference between and AI, and apart from that, we know that our grandmothers are no longer with us. Therefore, but that's it. It'll be so perfect. It'll be so perfect that we won't know.
We won't know. I agree with that. Absolutely. Well, Neil, again, I want to first thank you so much for coming on to our podcast. This was a fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you taking time, give us insight into your own career, your predictions. I agree with you. I can definitely say that I agree with you, everything that you've said. I know that's the direction you're going, but much like you said, we have to stay calm, not panic, and carry on, much like you said. Absolutely.
Keep calm and carry on.
There you go. Keep calm and carry on. Well, everyone, thank you so much again for joining us here on this podcast. You've mentioned Neil Leach. Neil, is there anywhere quickly that anyone that wants to know more about your work that they can visit you, website, podcast, or social media?
Yeah, I have I put the AI design, shall we say. I'm not sure I call them designs, but what I generate with AI, the buildings and so on, I put on Instagram. And it's my name, Neil Leach 14. I put it there. And there's a lot of stuff there on YouTube, on the platform I set up, Digital Futures. Just type that in, type my name. You'll get lots of different lectures. And I've got the second edition of my book is going to be coming out in May, Architecture in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. And it's not just about architecture. It's about all those questions, about avatars and Toby Walsh, about the history of AI and so on. And also, I think the question of neuroscience, how it's going to affect the way that we work and the minds that we have. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Very exciting. All right. Well, everyone, thank you very much for joining us here at the Digital Legacy Podcast. And please stay tuned. Thank you.